I stared at my phone screen, my hands trembling, as the numbers on my banking app refused to change. $43,800. Gone. 3 years of saving every penny, skipping vacations, eating ramen for dinner, working double shifts at the warehouse. All for my dream house. The one Sarah and I were supposed to close on next month. My thumb hovered over Mom's contact. The woman who taught me about responsibility, about earning what you want. She transferred my entire down payment to my unemployed brother without asking. My chest went completely numb. My fingers moved faster than my brain could process what I was seeing. I called Mom's number, my heart hammering against my ribs as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello, Gail, honey," came her familiar voice, warm and cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Mom, what did you do?" The words came out strangled, barely above a whisper. A pause. Then in that calm, matter-of-fact tone she used when explaining why vegetables were good for me as a kid, she said, "I transferred your savings to Marcus. He lost his apartment last week, sweetheart. He needs stability more than you do right now." The world tilted sideways. "That was my down payment. Sarah and I are buying a house next month." "Oh, Gail, you're young and strong. You can save again. Marcus is 32 and struggling. This is his chance to get back on his feet." I gripped the steering wheel of my Ford pickup until my knuckles turned white. "You had no right to touch that money." "Actually, I did." "Remember when you had that appendicitis scare last year? You put me on the account so I could handle your bills while you recovered. I never took myself off." The memory hit me like a sledgehammer. 6 months in the hospital, worried about missing work, grateful Mom was helping with my finances. I'd completely forgotten about the account access. "Where's Marcus now?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "He's staying here temporarily while he looks for work." I hung up and drove the 20-minute route to Mom's house in Lakewood, a modest ranch she'd owned since Dad passed 8 years ago. The autumn leaves crunched under my boots as I walked up the familiar driveway past the garden gnomes Mom collected. The front door wasn't locked. It never was in this neighborhood. I walked into the living room and found my brother sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, playing some war game on a massive television I'd never seen before. "Nice TV," I said. Marcus looked over, his sandy hair falling into his eyes the way it had since high school. He'd gained weight since I'd last seen him, his t-shirt stretched tight over his belly. "Oh, hey, Gail. Yeah, got a good deal on this setup. 75-inch screen, surround sound, the whole works. How much did it cost?" "Around $2,000. Why?" My blood pressure spiked. "With my money." Marcus paused his game, finally giving me his full attention. His brown eyes, so much like Mom's, showed no trace of guilt or remorse. "Look, man, Mom told me about your situation. I'm sorry about the house thing, but I was about to be homeless. You make good money at that warehouse job. You can save up again." 3 years, Marcus. It took me 3 years to save that money." He shrugged and turned back to his game. "Mom gave me $3,000 for household expenses too. You know, to help out while I'm here." The casual way he said it, like spending my life savings, was nothing more than borrowing a $20 bill made something cold and hard settle in my stomach. "Have you even been looking for work?" "Of course I have. The job market's tough right now. You wouldn't understand having steady employment and all." Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish rag covered in tiny roosters. Her graying hair was pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn for decades, and worry lines creased her forehead. "Gail, honey, please don't be angry. I should have called you first, but Marcus needed help immediately, and I knew you'd want to do the right thing." The right thing. I stared at her, this woman who'd taught me about working hard and earning my way. The right thing would have been asking me first. You would have said no. "You're absolutely right. I would have said no." Mom's face crumpled slightly. "I haven't been completely honest with you. Marcus hasn't just been looking for work these past few months. He hasn't really been trying very hard. I've been giving him money because I feel guilty. Guilty about what She sat down heavily in Dad's old recliner, the one she'd never let anyone else use. I wasn't fair to Marcus growing up. You were always the responsible one, the one who got good grades and stayed out of trouble. I praised you more, expected more from him because you set such a high standard. I think I owe him this chance. Marcus had stopped pretending to play his game and was listening intently, a smug expression on his face. So you decided to steal my future to pay for your guilt? I asked. Don't be so dramatic, Gail. It's not stealing when family helps family. I looked around the room, taking in the new gaming equipment, the expensive leather gaming chair Marcus was sitting in the stack of takeout containers on the coffee table. My 3 years of sacrifice of eating peanut butter sandwiches and driving a 15-year-old truck had become my brother's entertainment fund. How long has this been going on? I asked quietly. Mom and Marcus exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. How long, Mom? 6 months, she whispered, maybe a little longer. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been working overtime and skipping meals to save money, my own family had been systematically draining my accounts and lying to me about it. I drove home through the darkening Colorado streets, my mind reeling from what I'd just learned. The familiar landmarks of my neighborhood blurred past as I tried to process the magnitude of my family's deception. When I pulled into the driveway of the small apartment complex, where Sarah and I had been living together for 2 years, I saw her car in its usual spot. Sarah was sitting at our kitchen table when I walked in, surrounded by wedding planning materials. Fabric samples, flower catalogs, and venue brochures covered every inch of the surface. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she looked up at me with bright blue eyes full of excitement. There you are. I've been waiting for hours. I found the most perfect centerpieces for the reception, and my mom thinks we should... She stopped mid-sentence when she saw my face. What's wrong? I sat down across from her, pushing aside a stack of invitation samples. We're not getting the house. What do you mean the closing is in 3 weeks? The down payment is gone. My mother transferred it to Marcus. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something I'd never seen before. Pure, ice-cold fury. She did what her voice was barely controlled. $43,800 gone. She gave it to my unemployed brother so he wouldn't be homeless. Sarah stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the linoleum floor. How could you let this happen? The question caught me off guard. Let it happen, I didn't know it was happening. But it's your money, your account. How do you not know when someone takes $40,000? She had access from when I was in the hospital. I forgot to remove her. Sarah began pacing the narrow kitchen, her hands clenched into fists. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I already told my parents we were buying a house. I told everyone at work. My sister's flying in from Phoenix for the housewarming party we planned. Sarah, I'm the victim here. She whirled around to face me. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're too naive and disorganized to protect your own finances. What kind of grown man lets his mommy have access to his bank account? The words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. But what hurt more was realizing Sarah's first concern wasn't about my pain or our future together. It was about her embarrassment. I thought my family could be trusted. Well, clearly you thought wrong. She sat back down, but her posture remained rigid. My parents warned me about this. About what? About your family, about your background. They said people from your situation handle money differently. I felt like I'd been slapped. My situation... Sarah's face reddened slightly, but she pressed on. You know what I mean? Your mom works at a grocery store. Marcus has never held down a real job. Your dad was a mechanic. It's just different from how my family operates. Different how responsible families don't just give away $40,000 on a whim. I stared at this woman I'd planned to marry, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. So this is my fault for trusting my mother, E. It's your fault for not being more careful, for not protecting what we'd built together. The word we hit me wrong. What exactly did you contribute to that down payment? Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. We both knew the answer. I'd saved every penny while she'd continued her regular spending on clothes, dinners out, and weekend trips with her friends. I contributed emotional support, she said finally. Emotional support doesn't pay mortgages. Don't you dare throw that in my face. I've been planning our wedding, our future. I've sacrificed too. Sacrificed what? Time, energy. I could have been dating someone more established. The admission hung in the air between us like poison gas. After a long moment, she seemed to realize what she'd said. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. How did you mean it? I need some time to think about this, about us. This whole situation makes me wonder if you're ready for the kind of partnership I want. She stood up and began gathering her wedding planning materials. I'm going to stay at my sister's tonight, maybe for a few days. I need space to figure out if I can trust someone who can't even protect his own money. I watched her pack a suitcase with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this departure longer than she was admitting. She took the engagement ring off and set it on the dresser. Keep it safe, she said. I'll let you know what I decide. After she left, I sat alone in our apartment, surrounded by the silence that felt heavier than any noise. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my banking account, determined to understand exactly how much damage had been done. What I found made my stomach drop to the floor. The $43,800 transfer was just the most recent in a long series of transactions I'd somehow missed. Going back 6 months, there were dozens of smaller transfers. $200 here, $500, there sometimes as much as $1,000, all going to the same account. I added them up 3 times, hoping I was wrong. $7,260. My mother had been systematically draining my savings for half a year while I'd been working overtime to build our future. I grabbed my phone and called the bank's customer service line. After 20 minutes on hold, I reached a representative named Jennifer, who confirmed my worst fears. Yes, sir, I can see a joint account holder has been making regular transfers. The activity started in March and has been fairly consistent. Can you tell me what times these transfers typically occurred? Most were made during business hours between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. While I was at work sweating in the warehouse, moving freight, and earning overtime pay, my mother was systematically stealing my future. And Marcus had been using my money for restaurant meals, streaming subscriptions, and who knew what else. I pulled up Marcus's Facebook page, something I rarely checked. The evidence was all there posted for the world to see. Expensive dinners at local steakhouses, new clothes, concert tickets, a weekend trip to Las Vegas just last month. Every photo was a slap in the face paid for with money I'd earned loading trucks in 100-degree heat and below freezing cold. The final insult was a post from 3 days ago. Marcus at a casino in Blackhawk, an hour west of Denver, grinning behind a pile of poker chips with the caption, "Feeling lucky tonight." My down payment money had become my brother's gambling fund. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years and drove to the offices of Williams & Associates, the law firm that had handled Dad's estate. Janet Williams, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with silver hair and no-nonsense attitude, listened to my story while taking detailed notes. Technically, she said, when I finished, your mother had legal access to the account. Proving financial abuse would require demonstrating that she acted against your interests knowingly and maliciously. She stole $43,000. She transferred money from an account she was legally authorized to access. The emotional and ethical issues are clear, but legally it's complicated. Janet leaned back in her leather chair. Even if we could prove misconduct, litigation would be expensive. Probably $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees with no guarantee of recovery. So I'm just supposed to accept this. I'm not saying that. I'm explaining your legal options. There might be other approaches. I left her office feeling more helpless than ever. The legal system that was supposed to protect people like me was too expensive and uncertain to be useful. My phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor at Morrison Distribution Center. Everything okay? This isn't like you to miss work. The concern in that simple message almost broke me. My coworkers and boss cared more about my well-being than my own family did. I drove to the warehouse and tried to work a half day, but my heart wasn't in it. Word had somehow gotten around about my family situation, probably through my cousin Danny, who worked in receiving. The looks I got ranged from pity to suspicion, as if my inability to control my own finances reflected some personal weakness. During lunch break, my coworker Steve, a guy I'd known for 3 years, pulled me aside. "Hey man, heard you're having some money troubles. If you need a loan—" "I'm not having money troubles," I snapped. "My family stole from me." Steve held up his hands. "Sorry, that's not what I heard. Someone said you gave your brother money to help him out, and now you're trying to take it back." I felt my face burn with humiliation. "Who told you that?" "I don't know, it's just going around. Maybe I misunderstood." But I knew I hadn't misunderstood. Marcus was controlling the narrative, making me look like the bad guy for wanting my own money back. That evening, I drove past the house Sarah and I were supposed to buy. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in Thornton, with a 2-car garage and a backyard big enough for the kids we'd talked about having. The realtor's sign still stood in the front yard, but I knew it wouldn't be there much longer. I called Patricia Stone, our realtor, to break the news. "Oh no, Gail. I'm so sorry to hear that. These things happen, but it's always disappointing. Should I start looking for something in a lower price range?" "I don't think so. Not right now." "Take your time. The market will still be here when you're ready." Her kindness made the loss even more painful. This house had represented everything Sarah and I had planned together. Now it was just another dream that my family had destroyed. My phone rang as I sat in the driveway staring at the house that would never be mine. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "What do you want?" "Dude, you need to chill out. Mom's really upset about yesterday." "Mom's upset she stole my down payment." "She helped family in need. There's a difference." "Where are you calling from?" "Tracy's place. We're thinking about getting an apartment together." Tracy Miller. I'd met her a few times over the years. A local girl who worked part-time at a nail salon and seemed to encourage Marcus's worst impulses. "With what money? You don't have a job." "I've got some savings now thanks to Mom's help." "Tracy thinks I should start my own business." "What kind of business?" "Online stuff. I'm good with computers." The casualness in his voice, the complete lack of awareness of what he'd done to my life, made me want to put my fist through the windshield. "Marcus, that money was for my house. Sarah and I were supposed to close in 2 weeks." "Sarah will get over it. You guys are young. You can rent for a while longer." "Sarah left me." A pause. "Oh, sorry, man. I didn't know things were that serious with you two." "We were engaged." "Well, maybe it's for the best. I mean, if she'd stick by you during tough times, she wasn't the right one anyway." The fact that my unemployed gambling brother was giving me relationship advice with my own money made me hang up before I said something I'd regret. I drove home to my empty apartment and opened a bottle of beer, my first alcohol in 3 months. The silence felt oppressive, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sound of television from the unit next door. My laptop sat on the kitchen table where Sarah had been planning our wedding just 24 hours earlier. I opened it and began searching for information about identity theft, financial fraud, and family financial abuse. What I found made my blood run cold. In a Reddit forum about family financial abuse, I read story after story of people whose relatives had destroyed their credit, stolen their money, and ruined their futures. Many never recovered financially or emotionally. But one post caught my attention. A woman in Oregon had discovered that her brother was using her credit for various purchases. She'd gathered evidence, documented everything, and eventually managed to hold him accountable through a combination of legal pressure and family intervention. The key, according to her post, was information. Understanding exactly what had been done, how and when, then using that knowledge strategically rather than emotionally. I pulled up my credit report for the first time in months. What I saw there made me drop my beer bottle. 3 new credit cards had been opened in my name over the past 4 months. cards I'd never applied for, never received, never used. The combined credit limit was $12,000 and all three were nearly maxed out. Someone had been using my identity to fund their lifestyle, and I had a pretty good idea who. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, methodically writing down everything I knew and everything I needed to find out. The shock and anger were still there, but something else was emerging, a cold, calculated fury that demanded systematic action rather than emotional outbursts. At 6 a.m., I called the fraud department of all three credit card companies. The representatives were helpful once I explained I was a victim of identity theft. They froze the accounts immediately and began the process of investigating the unauthorized charges. "Sir, we'll need you to file a police report and send us a copy," said the representative from Capital One. These charges were made at various locations around the Denver metro area over the past several months. "Can you tell me where specifically?" She listed off restaurants, gas stations, and retailers I'd never been to, but I recognized the pattern. They were all within a few miles of Mom's house in Lakewood or near Tracy's apartment in Wheat Ridge. The representative from Chase was even more helpful. The most recent charges were made yesterday at a sporting goods store in Arvada. Someone bought camping equipment and outdoor gear, totaling $847. Marcus was planning his life with Tracy using credit cards he'd opened in my name. My next call was to Detective Ray Morrison with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, the Fraud Division. I'd found his contact information on the county website. "I need to report identity theft," I told him. "How much money are we talking about?" $12,000 in fraudulent credit cards, plus $43,800 stolen from my bank account by my mother. Family financial abuse gets complicated. Can you come in this afternoon to file a formal report? I took the day off work and spent 3 hours at the sheriff's office providing documentation and answering questions. Detective Morrison was a heavyset man in his 40s, who'd clearly seen this kind of thing before. "Your brother's not very smart about covering his tracks," he said, reviewing the credit card statements. "These purchase patterns clearly establish someone living in specific areas of Jefferson County. Combined with your testimony about his access to your personal information, we've got a decent case. What happens next? We investigate, gather more evidence. If the case is strong enough, we file charges. But I have to warn you, prosecuting family members is always difficult. Juries get sympathetic." What if I could provide more evidence? What kind of evidence? I'd been thinking about this all morning. What if I could document other illegal activities? Detective Morrison leaned forward. "What aren't you telling me? I think my brother might be running some kind of online scam operation. He's been bragging about making money online, but he doesn't have any legitimate income." That would change things significantly. Wire fraud, internet fraud, those are federal crimes. I left the sheriff's office with a clear mission. I needed more information about Marcus's activities, and I had an idea how to get it. Growing up, Marcus had always been the tech-savvy one in the family, at least according to Mom. But his idea of tech expertise was knowing how to download pirated movies and playing video games. When it came to actual security, he was remarkably careless. During my visits to Mom's house over the years, I'd watched Marcus log into various accounts. He used the same password for everything, Rusty 1987. The name of our childhood golden retriever, plus Mom's birth year. He saved all his passwords in his browser and never logged out of accounts when he finished using them. If I could access his computer, I might find evidence of whatever online activities he'd been bragging about. That evening, I drove past Mom's house twice, learning the patterns. Mom left for her book club every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and didn't return until 10. Marcus usually went to Tracy's apartment on Wednesday nights because she was off work. I still had my childhood house key on my keychain, the one with the little Denver Broncos logo that Mom had given me when I turned 16. She'd never asked for it back, and I'd never thought to return it. Wednesday night, I parked 2 blocks away and walked to Mom's house through the alley. The neighborhood was quiet. Most people already settled in for the evening. I let myself in through the back door, my heart pounding, despite knowing I wasn't doing anything technically illegal. This was still my childhood home, and I still had a key. Marcus's laptop sat open on the kitchen table, exactly where I'd expected to find it. The screen was dark, but when I moved the mouse, it came to life without asking for a password. He was logged into Facebook, Amazon, and several other sites. I opened his browser history and began scrolling through weeks of activity. What I found exceeded my worst expectations. Marcus had been running multiple online marketplace accounts under different names, selling products he clearly didn't own. Designer handbags, electronics, workout equipment, all advertised with stock photos and descriptions, copy-pasted from legitimate retailers. The scam was simple but effective. He'd collect payment from buyers, then either send nothing or send cheap knockoff items that bore no resemblance to what was advertised. When buyers complained, he'd simply close that account and open a new one. I took photos of everything with my phone, the fake marketplace profiles, the email confirmations from scammed buyers, the spreadsheet where he tracked his sales and profits. But the most damning evidence was in his email drafts folder. Marcus had been composing a message to Mom asking for another $5,000 for a business investment opportunity that would guarantee returns within 60 days. The email was scheduled to be sent next Monday. He was planning to scam our mother the same way he'd been scamming strangers online. I photographed everything, then explored his saved passwords. The browser had automatically saved login information for 3 different bank accounts: his Facebook profile, his email accounts, and most importantly, the online marketplace platforms he'd been using for his scams. I didn't change anything or log into his accounts from his computer. I simply documented what was there and left everything exactly as I'd found it. As I prepared to leave, I heard a car in the driveway. My heart stopped until I realized it was just the neighbor pulling into their own drive. But it reminded me how risky this was. I left through the back door and walked home through the October night, my phone full of evidence that would change everything. Back in my apartment, I organized the photos and created a detailed timeline of Marcus's fraudulent activities. The pattern was clear and damning. He'd been using my stolen money to fund his lifestyle while simultaneously running online scams to generate additional income. The camping equipment he'd bought with my credit cards wasn't for weekend trips. According to his emails, he was planning to disappear for a while if his scams caught up with him. He and Tracy had been discussing a temporary relocation to Montana where Tracy's sister lived. They were planning to run away with everything they'd stolen from me. But I had one advantage they didn't know about. I'd found their escape plan before they could execute it. The next morning, I called in sick again and drove to the public library in downtown Denver. I needed to access Marcus's accounts from a computer that couldn't be traced back to me. Using one of the library's public terminals, I logged into the first of Marcus's bank accounts. What I found there made my hands shake with anger. The account contained $57,412. Money from his marketplace scams combined with the funds he'd stolen from me and additional amounts I couldn't immediately identify. Marcus had been far more successful at his online fraud operation than I'd realized. The bank statements showed regular deposits from multiple sources: PayPal accounts, Venmo transfers, Zelle payments, and direct deposits from online marketplace platforms. I systematically documented every transaction, tracing the money flow back to its sources. Most of it came from unsuspecting buyers who'd paid for products they'd never received. Individual amounts ranging from $50 to over $2,000. But there were larger, more disturbing transactions. A deposit of $8,700 from someone named Dorothy Fleming with a memo line reading loan repayment. Another for $12,000 from Robert Chen, labeled investment return. Marcus wasn't just running simple online marketplace scams. He was operating a broader fraud scheme, possibly targeting elderly or vulnerable people with fake investment opportunities. I photographed every screen, every transaction, every piece of evidence I could find. Then I moved to his second account. This one contained another $34,000, mostly from recent transactions. The timing matched the period when my own down payment had disappeared. In his third account, I found the smoking gun that would change everything. Recent deposits totaling exactly $43,800. My stolen down payment money, broken up into smaller amounts to avoid detection. But Marcus had made a critical error. He'd kept detailed notes in his account memo lines, probably to track which money came from which schemes. The notes clearly identified Gale house money and mom transfer alongside deposits from his scam victims. The evidence was overwhelming and self-documenting. Marcus had essentially created a paper trail of his own crimes. As I prepared to log out, a notification popped up on his account. Someone was attempting to make a purchase using one of my stolen credit cards at that exact moment. The transaction was for airline tickets, 2 one-way flights from Denver to Billings, Montana, departing in 3 days. Marcus and Tracy were accelerating their escape timeline. I quickly accessed the airline website and found the reservation details. They'd booked seats on Friday morning's flight using the credit card Marcus had opened in my name. The tickets were expensive, over $800 each, because they were last-minute bookings. They were planning to run away with everything they'd stolen, leaving me to deal with the financial wreckage and the angry victims of Marcus's scams. But now I had something they didn't expect: complete access to their financial accounts and advanced knowledge of their plans. I spent the rest of the day at the library systematically changing security settings on all of Marcus's accounts. I added my phone number as a backup security contact, set up account alerts to be sent to a new email address I created, and enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. I didn't touch the money or make any transfers. Instead, I set up a situation where Marcus would be locked out of his own accounts when he tried to access them. He'd know someone had discovered his activities, but he wouldn't immediately know who or how much they'd learned. The beauty of the plan was that Marcus would panic and make mistakes, probably revealing even more evidence in the process. But I needed to move quickly. If Marcus tried to empty those accounts before Friday, all the evidence would disappear and the victims of his scams would never get their money back. I called Detective Morrison from the parking lot outside the library. I've found extensive evidence of the online fraud activities we discussed. Multiple bank accounts, detailed transaction records, evidence of ongoing scams targeting numerous victims. How did you obtain this evidence? I'll explain everything when I come in. But Detective, they're planning to leave the state on Friday. We need to move quickly. Can you be here in an hour? I'm on my way. The drive back to Jefferson County felt like the longest trip of my life. In my phone were hundreds of photos documenting the most extensive fraud scheme I'd ever imagined. Marcus hadn't just stolen my money, he'd been systematically defrauding people across the country for months. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had the upper hand. Detective Morrison's eyes widened as I walked him through the evidence. The scale of Marcus's operation was far beyond what either of us had initially suspected. This isn't just identity theft anymore, he said, scrolling through the photos on my phone. This is organized wire fraud, across state lines money laundering. We're talking about federal charges. What happens now? Now we move fast. I'm calling the FBI's white-collar crime unit. This case is about to get a lot bigger. As I left the sheriff's office, my phone buzzed with the first of what would be many notifications. Someone was trying to access Marcus's primary bank account and being denied due to the new security settings. The trap was working. I woke up Thursday morning to 17 missed calls and 23 text messages, all from Marcus. The messages ranged from confused to angry to panicked as he discovered one by one that he'd been locked out of all his accounts. The first few messages were relatively calm. Hey, something's wrong with my bank account, can't log in. Computer's acting weird, all my passwords stopped working. But as the morning progressed and he realized the scope of what had happened, the tone shifted dramatically. What did you do to my accounts? I know this was you, Gale. You're going to pay for this. I ignored all of them and went to work as usual. Let him panic, let him make mistakes. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mom. Gail Honey Marcus is very upset. He says someone hacked into his computer and stole all his money. Really, how much money did he have? He won't say exactly, but he's talking about getting the police involved. I almost laughed out loud. That's probably a good idea. He should definitely call the police. Can you come over after work? I think we need to have a family meeting about all this tension. I'll be there. The workday passed slowly. I kept getting notifications on my phone about failed login attempts on Marcus's accounts. Each failed attempt meant he was getting more desperate and more likely to do something stupid. At lunch, Steve approached me again. Hey man, heard your family situation got resolved. That's great news. Where did you hear that? Your cousin Danny mentioned something about your brother paying you back. I realized Marcus was still trying to control the narrative, spreading lies to make himself look better. But that was about to end. At 5:30, I drove to Mom's house. Marcus's beat-up Honda was in the driveway, along with a red Camaro I didn't recognize, probably Tracy's car. I found them all in the living room. Mom sat in Dad's recliner, looking worried and confused. Marcus paced back and forth like a caged animal, his face red with anger. Tracy sprawled on the couch, her long brown hair covering half her face, as she stared at her phone. There he is, Marcus snarled when I walked in. The computer hacker. I don't know anything about computers, I said calmly. You're the tech expert in the family. Don't play dumb with me. Someone locked me out of all my accounts yesterday. Someone who knew my passwords. How would I know your passwords? You tell me. Tracy looked up from her phone for the first time. She was probably in her late 20s with too much makeup and fingernails painted electric blue. This is really messing up our plans, Gail. Marcus needs access to his money. What plans? We're supposed to fly to Montana tomorrow to visit my sister. I nodded sympathetically. That sounds nice. Expensive trip, though. Marcus stopped pacing and glared at me. What's that supposed to mean? Last-minute flights to Montana must cost quite a bit. The color drained from Marcus's face as he realized I knew about the airline tickets. How do you know about Montana? Lucky guess. Mom looked back and forth between us, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Boys, what's really going on here? I pulled out my phone and showed her the first photo I'd taken Marcus's spreadsheet, tracking his marketplace scams. Mom, did you know Marcus has been running online fraud schemes for months? She squinted at the small screen, trying to understand what she was looking at. Those are just business records, Marcus said quickly. Business records for a business that sells products you don't own to people you plan to scam. I swiped to the next photo, showing email confirmations where buyers complained about never receiving their purchases. This woman paid you $300 for a designer purse. What did you send her? I don't have to answer your questions. Actually, you do. The FBI is very interested in answering them. The room went completely silent. Tracy's phone clattered to the floor. The FBI, Mom whispered. I showed her another photo, the bank account containing $57,000. Where do you think this money came from? Mom, Marcus doesn't have a job. She stared at the image, her face growing pale. I don't understand. He's been scamming people online, taking their money and sending them nothing. And he's been using my credit cards to fund his lifestyle while he does it. I pulled up the credit card statements on my phone, showing the charges made in Marcus's name over the past several months. These are federal crimes, Mom. Wire fraud, interstate commerce fraud, identity theft. Marcus finally found his voice. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. I spent 6 hours yesterday documenting everything. Your bank records, your email accounts, your online marketplace, profiles, your victim communications, everything. Tracy jumped up from the couch. Marcus, we need to leave, now. Sit down, Tracy. I looked directly at her. You're not going anywhere. Those airline tickets you bought with my credit card, the FBI knows about them. She sank back onto the couch, tears starting to flow. Mom was staring at Marcus with a look I'd never seen before. Pure disappointment mixed with growing understanding. Is this true? She asked him. It's not what it looks like. What does it look like I answered for him. It looks like your son has been systematically defrauding people across the country while using my stolen money and my stolen credit to fund his operation. It looks like he was planning to disappear tomorrow with over $90,000 in stolen money. Mom's face crumpled. $90,000! I showed her Marcus's bank account balances. 3 accounts, $91,412 total. Most of it stolen from his fraud victims, but $43,800 came directly from me. I gave that money to help him, she said weakly. And he used it to fund criminal activities. Marcus finally exploded. Stop acting like you're so perfect. You make good money you can save again. Those people I sold stuff to, they have money to burn, or they wouldn't be buying designer handbags online. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got hurt. I pulled up a screenshot of an email from one of his victims. This is from Dorothy Fleming, the 78-year-old woman who sent you $8,700 for a guaranteed investment opportunity. She's a widow living on Social Security and you stole her life savings. Mom gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. And Robert Chen. He's a college student who sent you $12,000 he'd saved for tuition because you convinced him it was a safe investment that would pay for his education. Tracy was crying openly now. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the room, finally understanding the scope of what he'd done. The FBI has all of this, I continued. Every transaction, every victim, every lie you told. And tomorrow when you don't show up for that flight to Montana, they'll know you've been caught. My phone rang. Detective Morrison's name appeared on the screen. I need to take this. Gail, we just finished our meeting with the federal agents. They want to move forward with charges. Can you come in tomorrow morning to finalize your statement? I looked around the room at my family. Actually, Detective, I think tomorrow afternoon would be better. I have a feeling there might be some developments by then. After I hung up, the room remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Mom spoke. What happens now? Now Marcus decides whether he wants to try to run and make things worse, or whether he wants to try to make this right. Marcus looked at Tracy, then at Mom, then at me. For the first time in his life, he seemed to understand that his actions had consequences he couldn't charm or lie his way out of. What would making it right look like? He asked quietly. Returning every penny you stole. Cooperating with the FBI to help them contact all your victims. Getting a real job and paying restitution for the damage you've done. And if I do that, then maybe eventually you can rebuild some trust with the family. But Marcus, you'll probably still face criminal charges. What you've done is serious. He nodded slowly, the reality finally sinking in. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. And now you have to deal with the consequences like an adult. 3 weeks later, I sat in my new home office looking out the window at the backyard I'd thought I'd never have. After Marcus cooperated with the FBI and returned the stolen money plus additional funds from his scam accounts, I'd been able to close on the house after all. The investigation had moved quickly once Marcus decided to cooperate. He'd provided access to all his accounts, helped the FBI identify his victims, and even assisted in contacting people who'd been scammed to arrange restitution payments. The scope of his operation had shocked everyone, including me. Over 18 months, he'd defrauded 47 people across 12 states, stealing a total of $134,000. The FBI had been tracking similar scams for months, but hadn't been able to identify the person behind them until Marcus's cooperation broke the case open. Detective Morrison had called me that morning with an update. Your brother will probably serve 18 months in federal prison, but the prosecutor is recommending the minimum sentence because of his cooperation. Most of the victims will get their money back. What about Tracy? She wasn't directly involved in the fraud scheme, but she knew about the stolen credit cards. She'll get probation and community service. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Justice was being served, but it had cost our family dearly. Mom had entered therapy to deal with what her therapist called enabling behaviors and golden child syndrome. She'd admitted that she'd favored Marcus throughout our childhood because she'd seen him as more vulnerable while expecting me to be strong and self-sufficient. I robbed you both, she'd said during our last conversation. I robbed him of the chance to develop real strength and responsibility, and I robbed you of the support you deserved. She'd asked if I could forgive her, and I'd said yes, but that forgiveness would take time and would require different behavior going forward. The biggest surprise had been Sarah's attempt to reconcile. She'd called me the day after the news about Marcus's arrest appeared in the local paper. I owe you an apology, she'd said. I should have supported you instead of blaming you for your family's actions. Thank you for saying that. Can we try again? I've learned a lot about myself these past few weeks. I thought about it carefully before answering. Sarah, I appreciate the apology. But when things got difficult, your first instinct was to protect yourself rather than support me. I need a partner who'll stand with me during the hard times, not someone who runs away and then comes back when the crisis is over. She'd been hurt, but had ultimately accepted my decision with grace. 2 weeks after that conversation, I'd met Amanda Rodriguez at the bank while finalizing the paperwork to remove Mom's access from my accounts. Amanda worked as a nurse at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital and had been dealing with her own family financial drama. Her sister had been stealing money from their elderly father. We'd started talking about the challenges of protecting family members while setting appropriate boundaries, and I'd been struck by her wisdom and compassion. She understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior. Amanda was coming over for dinner tonight along with Mom and Marcus. It would be Marcus's last family dinner before starting his federal prison sentence next week. The dynamic between us had changed completely. Marcus had gotten a job at a local grocery store, the first legitimate employment he'd held in over 2 years. He was paying me back the money he'd stolen in monthly installments, and more importantly, he'd stopped expecting special treatment or handouts. I never realized how much I was hurting people, he'd told me during our last serious conversation. I convinced myself that everyone I was scamming could afford to lose the money, but that was just me justifying what I knew was wrong. He'd shown me letters he'd written to some of his victims, apologizing and explaining how their money would be returned. Dorothy Fleming, the elderly widow, had written back to say she hoped he'd learn from his mistakes and build a better life. Her kindness made me feel worse than any anger could have, he'd admitted. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Amanda stood on my front porch holding a casserole dish and wearing the bright smile that had attracted me to her from the beginning. How are you feeling about tonight? She asked as I let her in. Nervous, hopeful, it's complicated. She set the casserole on my kitchen counter and turned to face me. You've handled all of this with incredible grace. Your family is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have you, I replied, meaning it completely. Mom arrived a few minutes later carrying flowers from her garden and looking older than I remembered. The stress of the past few months had taken a toll, but she seemed more genuine than she'd been in years. Marcus came last, walking in quietly and hanging his jacket on the hook by the door like he had when we were kids. He looked healthier than he had in months. Working a real job and living without the stress of running scams had been good for him. During dinner, we talked about ordinary things: Amanda's work at the hospital, Mom's book club, Marcus's experiences at the grocery store. It felt almost normal, except for the underlying awareness that this was a temporary piece. After the meal, Marcus asked if he could speak with me privately. We went out to the back deck, the same one where Sarah and I had planned to have summer barbecues. I want you to know that I understand what I took from you, he said. It wasn't just money. I took your sense of security, your trust in family, your relationship with Sarah. I took your peace of mind. I nodded, appreciating his words, but not sure how to respond. I also want you to know that what you did, catching me, stopping me, it was the best thing that could have happened. If you hadn't intervened, I would have kept going until someone got seriously hurt or I ended up in prison for much longer. I'm glad you see it that way. Do you think we can ever be real brothers again? Not like before, where I took advantage of you, but like equals who respect each other. I considered the question seriously. I think that's possible. But it'll take time and it'll require you to stay on the path you're on now. I will, I promise. As we came back inside, Mom was helping Amanda clear the dishes. They were talking quietly about something and both were smiling. What's the conversation about? I asked. Your mother was telling me about your father, Amanda said. How he taught you the value of honest work. Dad would have been disappointed in what I became, Marcus said quietly. But I think he'd be proud of who you turned out to be, Gail. The evening ended with hugs all around something that had seemed impossible just a month ago. As everyone prepared to leave, Mom pulled me aside. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want you to know that I'm proud of how you handled this situation. You were strong when you needed to be, but you were also compassionate. That's the man your father and I raised you to be. After everyone left, Amanda and I sat on the couch in my living room, surrounded by boxes I was still unpacking. Are you happy? She asked. I thought about the question. 6 months ago, I'd thought happiness meant having my down payment, my fiancé, and my family's approval. Now I understood that real happiness came from living with integrity, setting healthy boundaries, and surrounding yourself with people who respect and support you. Yes, I said, I'm happy. The house felt peaceful in a way I'd never experienced before. It was truly mine, bought with money I'd earned and protected, filled with furniture I'd chosen, decorated according to my own taste, rather than someone else's expectations. The past few months had taught me that family doesn't automatically deserve access to your resources or your trust. Real family, whether blood relatives or chosen family, earns those privileges through their actions, not their genetics. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior. Mom's attempt to help Marcus by stealing my money had actually prevented him from facing the consequences of his choices and growing as a person. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger and more resourceful than I'd ever realized. When everything fell apart, I'd found a way to not just survive, but to create something better. The next morning, I would go back to work at Morrison Distribution Center, but I was also starting an online business course at the community college. Amanda had suggested that my experience with financial planning and crisis management might translate into helping other people protect themselves from family financial abuse. You could teach people the warning signs, she'd said, help them set up safeguards before they become victims. It was an idea that excited me more than anything had in a long time. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to my bedroom in my house bought with my money, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, genuine peace. The future stretched ahead of me, full of possibilities I was free to choose for myself. I'd like to hear about your own experiences with family boundaries and financial trust. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about protecting yourself from people you love? How did you handle situations where family members crossed important lines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else going through a similar struggle. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and building stronger boundaries. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about standing up for yourself while still maintaining compassion for difficult family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you have the right to protect your future even from the people who are supposed to love you most. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say no to someone who's been taking advantage of your kindness. Here's to building the life you truly deserve, surrounded by people who support your dreams instead of stealing them.